Today is the first day of my summer vacation. It has definitely been an interesting way to start it off. You see, my family has always been haunted. Spirits and demons of different kinds have always followed my family around. In the house I currently live in, and have been living in for the years, my parents and I are accompanied by a white and transparent little girl, a tall dark shadow figure of a man, and a woman who has only been seen twice, but actually has colours filling out her clothes and body. It's considered normal to hear footsteps in the hallway, to see a shadow lurking in the corners, to feel the presence of the unknown, and to feel someone or something watching me as I go about my daily business. As it was summer vacation, I was determined to spend the first day of break catching up on my sleep. As I turned into a comfortable position, I heard my mother walking through the hallway. She's probably waiting for me to get up so she can drag me off to work with her. I cuddled deeper into my blanket as I heard my mother walking towards my door, which I close every night while I sleep. I kept as still as possible. She opens my door and is just standing there for a while, deciding whether or not I was actually asleep. She does this sometimes, but was taking longer than usual. I dug my nails into the palm of my hand to keep my face serious. I wanted to open my eyes, smile and tell her I'm actually awake, but decided not to because sometimes, if I stay asleep long enough, she'll leave me home and go to work without me. Finally, she slowly started to close my door, being careful not to wake me up, and I heard her walk away. I actually was sleepy, so even after she closed the door, I didn't move. I was drifting into dreamland. However, the lower half of my body was not covered with my blanket, and I noticed it was getting cold, so I opened my eyes and covered myself, then turned toward the door. She didn't close it properly. She usually does. I shifted my position once again and was now facing away from the door towards my wall. I could hear my mum walking around the house. She sounded like she was cleaning. She was going from one room to another, back and forth, passing through the hallway. Even though I couldn't hear her footsteps, I could tell because despite the fact that we have carpet, the floorboards under always tend to creak, just like my door does whenever it's moved. I heard her coming towards my room again. She paused at the door, then very carefully pushed it open. She stood there for a little while, then carefully closed it again. That's weird, I thought. Usually she only checks once. I took the blanket off. I was starting to sweat. I could hear her moving around the house, and I had just gotten comfortable when I heard her outside my room again. She opened the door as quietly as she could. She checked on me again, closed it slightly, then walked away. I was starting to get really uncomfortable. I had a strange feeling and I didn't know why. It's as if my brain knew something but wasn't bringing it to my attention. I listened to the sounds around me. My mother was in the kitchen. The dogs were still barking but were starting to quiet down. Wait, why were the dogs barking? Nah, something isn't right. I turned back to face the side of my room where the door was. I looked into the hall. Nothing. I tried to go back to sleep, but something wasn't quite right. My mind started wandering. What if it wasn't my mother that was walking around? What if it was a ghost? And that's when I felt it. The dreadful sensation that creeps over you when you're being watched. I opened my eyes, and that's when I saw him. Down the hall, to the left, some man was standing in the kitchen's doorway. I stared at him as the wheels in my brain started to turn. Someone is standing in my house and was staring right back at me. Who is he? He's not my father. Maybe it's my brother. No. Who is that? I continued to stare at him. I watched him, standing perfectly still as half of his body peeked out from the kitchen doorway. He was watching me watch him. I started to analyse the parts of him that I could see. He was tall, with dark short hair, most likely black. Slim, and his eyes, oh God, his big dark eyes were staring right into my soul. Although he looked vaguely familiar, I realised I still didn't know who he was. I knew something was wrong, but my mind was refusing to put two and two together. Finally, I realised I was in danger. Someone was intruding my home. Where are my parents? Is this person going to hurt me? I looked away. Although my mind was still groggy, it was working enough for me to realise that at any moment, this man could decide that I'm a threat and attack me. He could threaten me, hurt me, kidnap me, torture me, kill me. I closed my eyes, pretending that I was falling back to sleep. It was my best option. Maybe I was asleep. Maybe things would go back to normal when I opened my eyes again. I listened intently. I heard the sound of him moving back into the kitchen. No, this was definitely real. I opened my eyes again. He was no longer at the kitchen doorway. being careful not to make a sound. I got out of bed and I walked down the hallway to peer into the kitchen. No one was there. I quickly went to the window and looked outside. There was not a soul in sight. The street was empty of the people who are usually working on construction or the neighbours who watch their kids as they play outside. I looked into our driveway. Vacant. I ran into my mum's room and picked up my phone. I called my mum and begged her to send someone to pick me up. I then realised that even though I checked the kitchen, he could still be hiding in the laundry room that's right next to it. I peeked in there and saw that they had opened the door that's in there and gone outside. I closed the door, locked it, and promptly went into my room and locked myself in there. I put on some comfortable clothing and some shoes I could easily run in. When my dad got home, I followed him as he checked every room in the house. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Then we walked into my mum's old room, and it was all messed up. The drawers were open, things were in the wrong place, stuff was on the floor, her jewellery display was knocked over with most of the jewellery missing. It wasn't until I took all of this in that the gravity of the situation hit me. We'd been robbed. According to the neighbour across the street, he was watching the TV in his living room when he saw a young man casually ride up our driveway in his bike. He was thin-built, had short dark hair, and was wearing a dark t-shirt. According to him, the guy got off of his bike, leaned it against the side of the house, and walked back towards the street. He looked around, saw the neighbour watching him, then walked back to the side of the house as if it was no big deal. Thinking a friend of mine was visiting, he was no longer suspicious and went back to watching TV. After gathering all the information that we had, we put the story together. My mother left at 9, and when I called my mum for help, it was exactly 9:33. So this guy knew my mum left and would not be returning for a while. He also assumed that I would be at school, which is why he entered my room while not being careful of the noise, but then started to move very slowly and extra quietly when he saw me sleeping in my bed. He hadn't expected me to be home, which is why he kept checking on me every so often. He wasn't able to decide on what to do with me. To be honest, what bothers me the most is not simply the fact that he was so confident and casual as he was intruding, but that he didn't harm me. Naturally, a thief does not want to be recognised because they don't want to get into trouble. I am thankful that I was spared, but here's the problem. Put yourself into his shoes. If you were a thief and you broke into someone's house and found a young girl sleeping in her bed, what would you do? Leave in fear that she'd wake up and call the police? Kill her? Assault her? She is asleep after all. However, that's not what he did. He knows I saw him. I'm a loose end, a witness, a mistake. I would easily be able to give the police his description. Or worse, maybe I was more alert than he thought and would be able to identify him. But he didn't come after me. He didn't threaten me or harm me in any way. Instead, he just stood there as I looked at him. He reacted to my consciousness as if it was nothing, like if he knew I wouldn't be a real threat to him, even if I wanted to be. He waited until I closed my eyes and then he slipped out of the house as if nothing had happened. What scares me the most is that he's able to get into the house and move around it so smoothly. He knows who lives here, he knows our routine, he knows the layout of the house. If he didn't know before, he knows now, so what's next? Will he decide it's too dangerous to come back? Or will he regret not dealing with me? Will he come back with others to back him up? Or will he strike again after being more careful about making sure no one is home? Only time will tell. Maybe he knows us better than we think. Maybe he's someone that knows exactly how we live. Maybe that's why he was so casual about the entire thing. Because he knows how my mind works. All I know is that I have a new respect for those Lifetime movies now. I usually criticize the characters for not knowing what's so obviously going on, but I now understand that for some reason, things aren't as clear as you're experiencing them firsthand. So there it is, the first day of my summer vacation. I was about 7 years old and my brother was about 10. It was well past our bedtime when our mum woke us up off the sofa to put us in bed. Our dad worked construction out of town back then, so it was often just us three at the house for weeks at a time. Up the stairs and to the immediate right was our parents' bedroom. Going left put you in the middle of our hallway, Taking another left down that hallway led to my brother's room. The opposite end was my room, which was also across the hall from our upstairs bathroom. At either end of the hallway are windowed doors we always kept locked and rarely used. The door on my end led to a balcony overlooking our front yard, and the door on my brother's end opened up to our backyard porch. The house kind of leans into a small hill. My brother and mum both have a habit of waking up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I only know this because I was always a light sleeper and they just couldn't help flushing with the door wide open. This night, however, my brother stopped on his way to his room and came back towards the bathroom. I'm going to try pee before I go to bed. The past few nights I've been too afraid to walk to the bathroom. I keep seeing a man wearing stripes at the end of the hallway, he said. I don't know if my mum wrote it off as my brother telling ghost stories to try and scare me, or if she was already half asleep and didn't catch it, but she didn't react at all to my brother's confession. I, on the other hand, was terrified by it. The fear of seeing a ghost like that at the end of the hallway or through the windows is the reason I started running from the stairs to my bedroom at night. Years later, when I was about 18, my mum and I were having a conversation in the car about a dog that we had. We were sharing stories about Max's tendencies to destroy shoes and other unruly behaviours, when my mum blurted out, "Do you remember that time I opened the front door for the cops and Max ran inside to the kitchen and started tearing open that big bag of dog food we had?" This really caught me by surprise because in all the years I've lived in that house, we have never once called the cops. We're a gun-owning family in a quiet rural neighbourhood, so why would we need to? I asked her what she was talking about, and she looked equally surprised as if she had just revealed something by accident. "Oh, that's right. I never told you because you were too young at the time. One night I woke up hearing noises outside my window, and when I looked, I saw a man staring into my bedroom window." She went on to describe how turning on the lights had caused him to take off running and how she'd grabbed my dad's pistol before calling the cops. I can't remember all the details I gave them when they showed up, like tall white male, wearing a stripy shirt and jeans, short dark hair, something like that. They said it matched the description of a man that they were looking for in the area. It turns out he'd escaped from jail on a murder charge. Now, I know it sounds so obvious hearing these two stories together back to back, but it wasn't until a few years ago, when I was in my mid-20s, that I pieced together that my brother had unknowingly warned us about a murderer who spent multiple nights casing our home. A couple of years ago, one of my closest friends relocated cross-country with his long-term girlfriend to work a job he couldn't refuse. Only issue he had with that was he did not want to fly with his dogs when they made the move, since they'd be staying in a hotel for the first month. He was also a bit reluctant to fly them out due to health concerns for both pets. By the time he had located a home to rent, he was missing his furry little buddies and made the request of his sister, another close friend, and myself to drive them to LA to him. Now, we are Chicago folk, so the trip would be a long one. However, with the three of us to foot the nearly 30-hour drive, it would probably be a piece of cake. We left early and drove long hours. Along the way, it was decided between my friend and I that we'd foot the majority of the drive ourselves, and if we'd needed to, we'd let our friend's sister do some driving. We were on a bit of a time crunch due to a snafu with the rental agreement, so we didn't have the luxury to stop very often past an 8-hour stay at a Denver La Quinta Inn. As for the journey itself, it was relatively smooth, barring getting pulled over right before entering Utah for driving for 2 miles in the left lane of an empty highway. Whoops. From that point on, we made it through Utah, Arizona, and Nevada without much trouble until we entered California in need of gas. I had been driving for the majority of the first day and tagged my buddy in after being pulled over. I remained shotgun as the navigator, searching through the GPS for a fuel stop. We kept our eyes peeled for road signs till we discovered a sign pointing to Yermo Ghost Town, or something along those lines, which had a mobile station. How wonderful. It was convenient too, as it was located almost directly off of the interstate. We rolled in on a little more than fumes when we approached the pumps. Normally we let the dogs out at every rest stop, but having stopped not long before then, and with both dogs sleeping snugly in the back, I decided to pump gas without anyone having to leave the vehicle. My buddy driving had pulled us up on the opposite side of a beat-up green sedan with a short, plump gentleman who just turned in to approach the shop. I noticed a few other humpties at the pump, all unoccupied, and there were a couple of other cars parked up near the station, most likely belonging to the employees, so nothing really seemed out of the ordinary until I swiped my credit card. The pump rejected my first swipe attempt, which I chalked up to a misread. I swiped again, and the pump reads out, "Please see attendant." I was annoyed, but we needed gas, so I tapped on the window and told my buddy what I was doing and asked if anyone needed anything. After taking their orders for Gatorade and Marlboro Reds, I walked into the store and made a mental note of how strange this gas station was. Kind of quiet, especially for one right off the interstate, but that's no matter. As I walked through, more weirdness. First thing I noticed is that there were some boxes of chips left on the floor, like someone was stocking shelves and just quit. As I veered to my right, I noticed that immediately there was no one milling around the place. With the 6 cars beside my own out there, I felt like I would see someone. Things just got even weirder when I realised that there was no one behind the counter. No customers, no workers. And then it dawned on me. What had happened to the gentleman who was at the pump adjacent to mine? Surely they can't all be in the bathroom. This is where I begin to feel this gnawing sensation in my stomach. Something isn't right. I have always been a person who felt like I could trust my instincts, and those instincts were screaming at me to just get the hell out. I wanted to run, but I held back. I would look suspicious booking it out of a gas station that was empty, and decided to just play it cool, natural. Don't let your body language let on how badly you're freaking out in your head. I was probably inside of this gas station for only a couple of minutes when I left, but I stopped just before exiting to listen for something. Anything. A flushing toilet would have been a good sound. But no, nothing. As I exit the shop and see my car, I begin to feel dread. It's like that moment in a movie where the hero is about to make it to the end of their trial, but the celebratory fanfare disappears, and in that silence, something comes down and strikes them down. I am about 25 yards from the car when I see this gentleman come out from around the side of the shop opposite me. This is not the same man I saw pumping gas. He was larger, and he had a peculiar look on his face. The best way I could describe it is like Nick Cage's smile from the movie Face Off. I continued walking to my car, but when I turned back to look at him, he was now walking towards me with a purpose. At this point, I noped my way back to the car with an increased urgency in my step. And of course, my friend has the door to the car locked like a complete douche clown. There is also now a 95-pound golden retriever sitting in my seat. Apparently, my travel companions did not notice how freaked out I was, or the creepy gentleman still walking in my direction. I punched the window and told him to unlock the freaking doors, to which he only half rolls down the window to tell me that the dog was in my seat and they were afraid she'd jump out the door when I opened it. I reached my hand in and threw the dog towards the back seat as hard as I could, while my friend is now just realising how freaked out I am. He started the car and drove off quickly. I took one last look back and see Nick Cage has stopped about a pump away from where we were, still with that same look on his face. We found another gas station further down the road, this time with a ton of people inside and out. After thoroughly creeping out my friends with the story, as I pumped gas, we made our way back to the interstate, which meant passing that same gas station again. It's been about 15 minutes since we pulled out initially, and we all go silent as we notice that those very same cars are still sitting in the same spots where we had left them. After thoroughly freaking out for a few miles, I received a phone call from my credit card company about a $100 charge at Mobile Station. The lady on the phone was really helpful in fixing the situation for me and was as entirely creeped out by the situation as we were. In the end, we made it to LA and had a great vacation, but it still bothers me as to what the hell was going on in this little gas station off the highway, and what the hell was that smiling man's story. So, crazy smiling man and whoever else was lying in wait at Yermo Ghost Town exit Mobile Station, let's not meet.